So we'll start by introducing ourselves. I'm Colin Van Dyke, the CTO of Blue Orange Digital. Been building and running this engineering team for about 4.5 years, and extremely passionate about all topics AI and data across my career, both in startups and in enterprise scenarios. Really excited to share some insights on all these topics from my experience before Blue Orange and all of our great experiences working with our clients across these topics.
I'm Dean Sorelli. I head up engineering at Blue Orange. And I am here to ask you, Colin, given all the things that's in the literature today and in writing online, are we at an existential moment for software engineering? Will AI spell the end of software engineering as we know it today?
Well, I certainly hope not. But I think all the data and analysis to this point is showing that we are at an existential moment in terms of how software engineers operate in their jobs, but we're not at, I think, a point where we can say for sure that software engineering and the surrounding skills are going away from kind of humans being very involved in those processes. I think it's not a dying discipline at all. I think we're seeing it evolve in some very interesting ways that are opportunities for enterprises to take advantage of. I think we're seeing kind of the core engineering skills that have always been, I think, the most important to anybody who's really performing at a high level in an engineering role, and just being amplified by the incorporation of AI tooling and techniques. So we're seeing kind of the core critical thinking and problem solving skills that requires to build any sort of complex system being, I think, more important today than ever, being augmented and maybe accelerated by kind of the AI tools that are being put out there. Even just ChatGPT being a kind of pair programming assistant or a thing to bounce ideas off of can accelerate the way that engineers think about and come up with ideas for the systems that they're working on. I think there's a real value in having that. There's always been this idea of kind of rubber duck debugging, where if you talk to somebody else about either a coding challenge or a bug that you're working on, it helps you kind of explain what you're doing, and by explaining it, you kind of come to the solution yourself. And using AI in the same way with I think a lot more, I think, information backing up what it's responding to you with, because a rubber duck doesn't actually give you any good information. I think really accelerates your ability to solve problems and think differently about the problems that you're trying to solve. And then the other thing is we're seeing kind of engineering roles blend here, where just being a software engineer is not kind of like enough these days. We're seeing software engineers expected to start weaving in skills of data engineers or AI engineers, or understanding how these types of systems can be kind of stitched together. So the traditional kind of roles that we have within the engineering discipline are blurring together, I think, in an interesting way that we haven't seen as much in the past, where we saw more kind of siloing and splitting into roles. Now it's easier to move between them, and I think more expected to move in between them as well. So very interesting times in the engineering field and engineering leadership landscape. So I think a lot to be excited about, not to be scared about. So with that, I think it's interesting to think about kind of what architecture patterns might change here. So Dean, what are you seeing in terms of like architecture patterns coming out of this rise of AI today?
Well, for sure, lately, Colin, there's been a huge increase in LLM enhanced architectural patterns. So where there might have been a typical 3-tier model or an N-tier model with APIs and microservices, That's great. They'll have typical, typical actors might be databases, interfacing layers, abstraction layers, user interface, front end layers. We see the introduction of a few new players. So one of them are API-based large language models. Those have exploded since OpenAI's incredible emergence toward the end of 2022 and all through 2023. But with them comes a few other things. You can get natural languages that work in an intelligible way because GPT-4 or GPT 3.5 Turbo, these make reasonable full sentence answers, and that can be useful for generating text AI, similar answers on image generation and even video generation. There's a new introduction of a Chat My Data application for unstructured or documents data. Usually that ends up introducing something called a vector database. That's a new player on the field. There are a lot of open source ones. There are paid for commercial managed ones. More and more so, we're seeing architectures that include a vector database to work out its workflow, frequently in conjunction with natural language interfacing, but not always. The second pattern we'll find is a lot of call for adding a natural language to an existing product. So this would be if I have a database, maybe I have to have a database engineer or report engineer do some work to pull the information out of a system. No longer. Now I can go to a text window, type in my request, and bang, the system pumps out my answer. Modeled after chat. In fact, ChatGPT derives its name from that singular type of interface. There are others as well. I think there's a third area that's beginning to emerge, which we call command and control patterns with natural language. Sometimes the literature might call these agent-triggered workflow patterns. In this case, normal human speaking or typed language, either one, drive certain actions. Open a ticket, close a ticket, start a new application. A lot of these things that you might have done at your house with products that listen to your voice, hey Siri, hey Amazon's version. Now you can do these with your industrial strength, commercial corporate data, maybe even some corporate actions, write an email, on and on like that. So 3 different patterns, all of them with large language models being injected because they're so useful, because they have the ability to tackle arbitrary text in unstructured formats, better, more expansive than a relational database might have. These use cases are just abounding all over the place. So with these new elements, they're working with them requires different thinking, a little bit different pattern finding. Colin, if that means a shift for engineer thought patterns or an expansion of it, what does that mean for engineering leadership?
Great question. So I think there's a lot of challenges and opportunities within engineering leadership, both on kind of how teams are managed and run and how you're enabling your engineering teams, and the tooling and landscape that exists around these LLMs and foundation models, and kind of which ones you're going to use and how your enterprises can adopt them. So in the first case, you're looking at engineering teams today are almost kind of like going to be table stakes for being enabled with new LLM or Gen AI based tooling for coding assistance, for helping to understand their code and refactor their code. There's this whole new class that's emerged of tools like GitHub Copilot, of Cursor, SH, which is an IDE based on VS Code that has a LLM either powered by GPT-4 or 3.5 or a custom LLM from Cursor, allowing you to kind of work it into your workflow either by having it write code and rewrite code or answer questions about your code. These tools are going to be are today really starting to change the way that software engineers work. And you want to think about, as an engineering leader, which ones make sense for your teams, how you can get access to them for your team so that they can take advantage of them, and really work with your leadership to to get buy-in from above on these things, because none of them are free. But there's a lot of benefits that you need to start taking advantage of. There's been a number of studies now across the industry, some of them from Microsoft and GitHub and AWS, kind of touting some of the benefits of their specific tools, some from third parties, showing kind of the benefits of using these types of tools. But the numbers coming out of them are really crazy. Kind of across the board, there's like about a 55% increase in kind of the speed of completion of kind of non-trivial engineering tasks, both from a study by Microsoft, from people using GitHub Copilot within their workflow, and from AWS using their Code Whisperer tool to help complete tasks. And if you think about it, 55% is an extremely high amount of speed boost for an engineer, especially if you think about what you're paying people. People need to engineers want to be able to complete tasks faster. I think your business partners want your teams to be able to complete things faster. So being kind of aware of the benefits of these types of tools as an engineering leader, and how you can bring them into your organization is going to be key. And I think it's also going to be a really, at least in the near term, kind of a feature of your organization to help attract and retain talent, so that you can make sure your team is the best. And people are going to want to use these tools. If they don't have them, they're going to feel like they are not fully empowered to do their jobs, and are going to be either at a disadvantage, or they're going to start using them without permission. And you want to figure out a way to control that narrative, so that you can do it in a way that's actually well managed. So there was another survey that came out last year from GitHub. It was one of their GitHub developer surveys that showed that there was a 92% positive response rate from US-based developers, saying that they already use some of these AI coding tools within their workflow. So if your organization is not giving them access to these tools, they're using them anyways, without your permission. So it's both good, because they are proactively trying to do the best job that they possibly can by adopting these tools quickly and working them into their workflow. But it's also a huge IP risk for you and for your organization, in terms of what information is making its way into these tools. How do the organizations that are making those tools, like OpenAI and AWS and others, using the information that's put into those tools? So it's a gigantic IP risk if you don't have strategy for how to adopt them that's both kind of in line with your organization's risk profile, but also in line with how your developers and programmers and engineers want to work with code. So I think it's worth taking a look at the pros and cons of these different tools that are out there, and finding ones that make sense for your organization. Because the last thing you want to do is have like all of your IP sent to some third-party company that you don't trust accidentally, and then there's some sort of leak, and now all your code's out there. So it's worth taking a look and being very mindful and careful about what you're adopting when. But as an engineering leader, you are responsible for enabling your team, and this is going to be a critical component of that moving forward, is adopting and getting your team on board with these things. So I think a lot of fun things coming up out of that, Dean. Hopefully hopefully your engineers are all using these types of tools in their work, and seeing the benefits. But see what from your perspective, what kind of challenges are engineering leaders going to see in implementing kind of these types of new AI initiatives?
Well, there's a couple of things that are involved in this, but your cautionary note, and I think it's important, is that where traditional engineering tools might have been a tool that ran locally on my machine, most AI tools, and certainly OpenAI and Anthropic, these are tools that connect to a third-party API to get their job done. Information goes out of the developer's machine over to that third party. It does things. It sends an answer back to my laptop or my local machine. And there can be a misunderstanding that, what's being shared. It's important that people keep a good boundary around that. We'll talk more about that in a second. But always keep that in mind when turning it on, especially when crafting policy. Worry about, do I have an isolated environment? Have I arranged for such one? Is it proprietary to our organization? Can I safely use it? And can I safely have my engineers use it? The next thing to worry about is, and a pattern that we're seeing come out of AI generated code, is a software source code version of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And it might even be not garbage in and still garbage out. In some cases, in many cases, there's an adage that you start using AI, you tell it to go program something, it looks like it generated something, you copy it, you paste it in, you compile it and run it, or just execute it in an interpret, and it doesn't work. It just has failures, it has errors, it makes rookie mistakes. And why wouldn't it? It's been trained on all the information in the internet. It might pick an outdated version of a library, an outdated version of code syntax that's no longer even accepted or has been marked as unsafe. Unsafe code can be generated in certain circumstances. It's important to work harder on how to frame your request to an AI. Tell it, only use the latest versions. Tell it, keep it short. Only use local library references. Don't use public accesses for CSS style. Only use local ones because they can be hijacked. A lot of that sort of care that you might put into crafting your own code, well, you have to put that care into crafting the prompt for generating the code. And when you do, it will pay off. Almost every engineer we've had on our team has mentioned how their first couple of tries went badly. Generated terrible code that they'd be embarrassed to check in, that they would never check into a source code base or commit to Git. But almost every one of them works with the system to find better ways to make use of it and gain that, what was it, a 43% productivity advantage?
55%.
55, even better. So one particular engineer in his private hobby work reports that he gets 100% success, Colin. 100%. First try generated code works every time. I asked him, how did you do this? And he has a few strategies here. One of which is he breaks the problems down into very small problems. Please write me a class that does this. Please add this, that, and the other thing into this class. Please instantiate this class in this place, on and on like that. And he's actually made a small working toy game 100% through prompt engineered generated code. And that's really saying something. Now, that doesn't work everywhere, but it is possible to refine our approach on how we generate code and the tools, how we drive the tools to generate that code. There is one more real big dangerous area and an area that's all too easy to slip into. Can you imagine what that might be, Colin?
I'm not sure.
Data loss, data leaking, accidental data leaking. Here's a great example. So I'm writing some code. I pull in some sample data, or better yet, I even pull in some live data, and I route that over to a public entity instead of a proprietary AI, a public AI like GPT-4 on OpenAI. I send the actual data in my request, something like, please reformat this data into rows and columns. And I put that in the API call. Guess what? it goes out to OpenAI or Anthropic or name your LLI, Bard, onwards and onwards. That raw data is now part of the payload that's just been accidentally exfiltrated, in the worst of all cases, accidentally exfiltrated from a client or an enterprise. Code data that should never have been changed. Maybe it's my phone number, maybe it's my name, maybe it's my address, maybe it's my credit card number. That would be a terrible mistake to make.
Mhm.
This is why, I'll like double down on Colin's warning. Make sure you set things up to succeed. Use proprietary AI environments for your corporate data, for your corporate code, to help guarantee that you have no leaks. Set that as a policy, maybe even make it easy. Give developers internal keys that they can use to use those systems before they do their first bit of work, on their way in, do it there. So
Great point.
buyer beware, warning, right? You can get the productivity gains, you can do things to be safe. Those are the sort of the big things to wrestle with. Improve your prompt engineering to get better at this. Those are the big deal considerations to worry about, Colin. What kind of specific impacts will happen for engineering leaders as AI comes into our sphere of professional work?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So I think there's going to be, or there is already happening kind of a fundamental shift in part of a technology leader's role within an organization. I think over the past year, what I've heard from many engineering leaders, across pretty much every industry that I've talked to, is, they're being asked more and more from their leadership, how are we going to adopt AI? Like, what can we either roll into our product? What wins can we have from the adoption of generative AI, and all the hype that happened over the 2023 year. And I think they obviously are already very involved in the technology strategy, but I think more than ever they're asked to kind of wade through the noise of this hype wave that's happened over the last year and figure out what's real, what can we use, what's worth ignoring because it's not going to turn into actual business value. And I think there's no signs of that slowing down for technical leaders. I think people in the engineering space are going to have to stay on top of what's going on and going to have to talk to their leaders in the space and see what they're using, understand from people like us what we're seeing across the industry that they can take back to their organizations and kind of bring in as tangible wins. And be able to manage up to their leadership teams, kind of what is the adoption of AI look like within the context of their business and their product and their engineering teams. So that role is extremely important, and I think needs to be proactively adopted by people in engineering leadership roles across the board. I think this is on top of all the delivery that's already happening from engineering leaders on managing those teams and making sure that they're paying attention to the metrics on how their engineering teams are performing and delivery of features and refactoring old code bases and architecting new products. So it's additional thing that's been thrown on top of their plate that they gotta handle. So it's not going to be easy because there's a lot of noise out there. And it's impossible to stay on top of everything. But I think there's a lot of there's a lot of exciting stuff going on too. At the end of the day, there's a lot of what we're hearing from a lot of businesses and engineering leaders and business leaders in terms of like fear of missing out. So the FOMO that people are feeling around how AI is being adopted and how other companies are moving so fast to bring it into every piece of their business. And I think some of the interesting data that dropped at the end of the year was really only about 10% of enterprises and businesses really found tangible business value out of the implementation of Gen AI within within their processes and within their products in 2023. So even though there was a lot of noise, a lot of excitement around it, that people have not missed out. As long as you're kind of have your eye on the ball in terms of, what's going on now and what people are kind of tangibly doing with it. You don't have to feel that FOMO. It's kind of like now is the time that we're seeing, people take the steps to actually realize business value from it. I think 2024, that's going to be the theme. And I think that's going to accelerate into the future. I think when you think about the timing of when this stuff started getting very exciting and coming out, November 2022, that's kind of a tail end of the kind of budget cycles for 2023 for a lot of companies, right? So the excitement around ChatGPT and Gen AI was not at the fever pitch at the right time to really be fully embedded into the budget cycles for enterprises and companies of all sizes. So there was a lot of, I think, scrambling to move it into the budget and reprioritize stuff to take advantage of it. But again, that turned out to be 10% of companies really realizing the business value. I think 2024, they had a full budget cycle to really think about how they wanted to do it. The tools have evolved a lot since then to really, be at a point where, people can be more productive with these tools and not spend a lot of time spinning the wheels on what's the best thing to use, how does this work? There are now a bunch of patterns that have been established. I think RAG is a big pattern that is only getting easier and more advanced as we come into 2024 and continue. So I think the chance for enterprises to plan properly and start adopting this stuff, they don't move as quickly as a startup. So being more mindful about how they adopt new technology and plan for it is, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more uptick this year in that business value. I think that's a big exciting part, and that brings me a little bit to I think one of the core pieces for really taking advantage of that business value is foundational data infrastructure is, I think, one of the pieces that I think technology leaders, but all businesses need to be thinking about in order to realize that business value is having a good foundation to build on top of, having a well managed data ecosystem where what data is clean, what your data quality is, where your data is and what's available. Having that sorted out and being in a place where you can start bringing in tools that have Gen AI built into them to start taking advantage of that is going to be super important. So if you don't have your core data infrastructure in a sound place, now is the time to really be getting that in order and really prioritizing closing the gaps. So I think the end of the day is a lot of exciting stuff. Don't feel like you're missing out. It's gonna be great. So a lot of fun opportunities and challenges this year with Gen AI and leadership.
So only 10% of enterprises reported capturing business value with AI in 2023.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing across a number of reports. So it kind of makes sense, right, in terms of the timing. But at the end of the day, that's where it netted out. It's a lot of hype.
But you're expecting 2024 to have more of an onslaught of more enterprises coming in and other companies and businesses using AI. So as they do, what would be good? What are maybe a couple good examples? What will these look like? How will AI help us going forward? Or have we learned anything that might apply going forward?
So we've seen a number of great examples of Gen AI being integrated into enterprise, business processes or challenges or projects in ways that really, I think, change the kind of level of impact that those projects have. So one of the ones that is kind of like my favorite is we worked with a large Detroit-based enterprise last year who was working on centralizing millions and millions of engineering requirements across a dozen or more systems. They had, I think, many, many, many years of these requirements built up and spread across different formats, different systems, different teams that had been doing things, in different ways at different levels of quality over the years. And they couldn't really do anything with this data because it was so spread out and disparate. So I wanted to help streamline product development and manage it better and be able to do more advanced analytics and stuff on top of it. So they went forth, before we engaged them, to really try and plan out how they would transfer all this data and use some manual testing to scope it out. And after bringing in a couple dozen people to do some manual translation of this data into the new systems and the new formats, they kind of extrapolated that into the fact that it would take millions of man hours to actually complete this task end to end. And obviously that was kind of out of the question to expend that many man hours to do that. And there were also some traditional automation approaches that were applied to the challenge. But given the nature and kind of nuance in changing some of these requirements from one format to another, you have to be really careful about not changing the meaning of certain things, and it was not necessarily something that could be done with a traditional rules-based automation approach. So Gen AI was brought in by us to really try and solve this problem at scale with some some of that nuance and a lot more intelligent application of natural language abilities. So we came in and built a system around a number of generative AI agents, helping to basically translate these requirements, some of them with some very specific rules, some of them with kind of broad rules that they were applying, and kind of came up with a system that translated them in a very advanced way with kind of a custom fine-tuned model and advanced orchestration and some novel techniques that we applied for, say, running requirements through, say, many iterations of a similar process and scoring it to try and get the highest result. And after all that, we were able to build a system that would run data through end to end in about 18 hours and could be extrapolated, to run, I think, all the data in a much shorter period of time than the many, many millions of man hours that it had originally been estimated to take. So a huge win for being able to apply some brand new technology to a problem that otherwise could not have been solved today. So really, really exciting wins there. What about you, Dean? Any examples that you've seen over the last year that excite you?
One comes to mind for sure. So that example took, you said millions upon millions of person hours and shrunk it down to like days?
Days, yeah.
I'd do that in a second. So the one that jumps to my mind comes from it's a private equity example. We have a client who's a private equity firm in the real estate market. If you know anything about private equity, it's very competitive. All of the private equity firms are constantly looking, not just for good deals, but for the best deal, the best possible setup with the best acquisition or sale price for thousands upon thousands of companies who could potentially be portfolio companies or potentially be buyers for portfolios. So the day in and day out work that these firms do with our help, this one in particular with our help, we built a data platform that can analyze hundreds of thousands of companies every month, every week, every day, rate them according to a bunch of scoring mechanisms, sort them by order, and the firm picks those up. In the case of prospect companies, it picks them up to figure out who should they be in touch with, who should they be talking to, What kind of deals might they be amenable to all day long? Well, they're not the only ones doing this. So are all the other private equity firms in real estate. And that makes for a very competitive environment. So when OpenAI's ChatGPT large language model came on the scene late 2022, our engineering teams got right to work. Within weeks, they bolted a natural language front end onto the data platform that exists, large, comprehensive platform. Well, by adding natural language queries onto that system, people could ask questions and get answers from the data. And that's something, and I'll explain how, that's something that fundamentally changed part of how they do business every day. I mentioned that private equity in general is hyper competitive. Finding the right deal sometimes means taking the right slice of data or view or perspective of all the companies on your plate and being able to unearth that hidden golden nugget of value, this company that doesn't maybe score so great on the traditional metrics, but has that one magic thing that's incredible, right? Like all the penthouse suites in LA. They would be worth a lot of money. How do you find them when your traditional metrics don't? Well, traditionally, this current firm is very agile. They come up with a business idea, they chat about it with a product owner, very quickly translate that into an engineering team who would nimbly pick that up, try some data queries, maybe wrap that into a starter report, 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks of polishing. The new metric would be in place, and the firm would have eyes on, which are the best from this perspective right away. Pretty fast, pretty quick, very nimble, very agile. The thing is, with this language interface, natural language interface bolted on, that whole process can be moments. And this is what they've experienced. Here's an example. Give me a list of all the commercial properties in San Antonio on the 5th floor and higher that are south facing, and give me a history of their pricing data over the last 3 years, and do all the same for north facing offices in San Antonio and in Dallas, and see if you can find any similarities. And out comes some answers in full form text, in some cases with agent enhancements that we've added, with tabular data that comes out in columns and rows that can be read by humans, or graphs that can be generated with the right agents attached. All of it ready to be used instantly. I mentioned full form text. You can copy and paste, bring it into a buyer's prospectus, put it into a proposal for a specific client, bring it into an insurance application, on and on. Suddenly, instead of waiting 3 weeks for this, it's right at your fingertips. It's copy, paste, done. That's made them become one of the most analytically competitive private equity firms in their market. And it's really helped them up their game and pick up speed and get more creative in even more ways that we'll talk about maybe in a future episode, Colin.
Oh, so sounds like the future. Yeah. So what's one way that you can get a quick win with AI today?
For firms that haven't, for all sorts of very good reasons, maybe hasn't really started. Perhaps they've had some experimentation going on with sandbox areas. Perhaps engineers have been doing toy projects outside of work and have some nascent, beginning skills. A really great low barrier to entry, anyone can do it, way to immediately begin extracting actual palpable engineering business value using AI is to use the LLM copy and paste method. Now, I'm not advocating that you do this just straight away. First, set up a proprietary environment. Be safe. Set that environment up. And then take a piece of your code that is complicated, that scores the worst on cyclomatic capacity, cyclomatic complexity, the most difficult area of software, maybe a really convoluted SQL query. I've recently been at a place that had a 60-page stored procedure. That's pretty complicated.
You printed out that stored procedure?
Absolutely. We worked on paper for sure. Well, copy that, paste it in, tell the AI, refactor this, make it simpler, make it smaller, make it tighter, make it easier to read, make it more robust, make it more maintainable, and see what comes out. And take what it came out and run it through a code quality analyzer like SonarQube. Look at the metrics. Did they get better from the original to the later? If they did, and you might consider it, look at the code, read it. If you think, hey, that's a lot more readable, our guys could begin working with this better, then take the next step. Run it through the unit tests you have, end-to-end tests, any kind of regression automation that's in place, and check it again. You want everything that passes to still pass. Once you get to that point, it might be time to consider actually using this and investing the human resources that are involved in productizing that code. Put it into actual code control and integration. Move it into human-based QA and validation with expert augmentation on this. Use it in maybe even user acceptance testing and progress it. Take all that human investment, which is your most valuable resource. Take all that human investment and apply it all the way into production code. That is a very fast way that nearly any firm can begin having an AI initiative inside their firm. Again, use the safeties, get a proprietary environment together to take advantage of this, and then go ahead and take advantage of it. Be cautious, but be bold.
I love it. I love it. All right. I think that that ends our discussion for today. Wanted to thank everybody who's attended, and I think look out for our invite coming to our next session in February. And yeah, thank you, Dean, for all of your insights today on how AI is affecting leadership on the engineering side.
Thank you for your part on this, Colin, and I'll see you in the breakout session.
See you in the breakouts.